Hi, I'm Daniel. I talk about education and careers in computer science and biology and STEM more broadly. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience at Washington State University as a grad student. Some things that I think will be helpful in terms of this video for anyone who's considering WSU are things about Pullman, Washington, and the experience over there being a Coug. I will say I can't speak to living on campus or being an undergrad there. That's different, but I think I'll still be able to add some insight in terms of the community over there, the Pullman vibe, things like that, and grad school for anyone who's interested in grad school over there. My experience there, some context for undergrad, I really got interested in science and philosophy. I took a entomology class, which is the study of insects, and that got me really interested in entomology, and I decided to go study it for my first grad school program. So I enrolled in a Master of Science in Entomology at Washington State University, and there were so many things I really liked about the program and other things I did not like. And getting into briefly about my experience in the program, and then I'll talk more broadly about Pullman afterwards. I moved there, it was July 2019, a month after I graduated with my bachelor's degrees, and I started over there. And yeah, there were a lot of really cool things about going somewhere different, and it really is different than what I'm used to. I grew up in a suburb of Seattle, so still in Washington State, and I went to undergrad one of my undergrads was in Bellingham, Washington, which is northern Washington. Really rainy, but also really beautiful. The trees, the ocean, all the lakes are just fantastic up there. So to go from there and Western Washington in general to Eastern Washington, which is a lot different, was pretty starkly different, but I also enjoyed it. I will say some people will not like it over there, and I'll talk more about that later. So I moved there July 2019, and there were a lot of cool things getting right into my research and the coursework for my master's program. I fell in love with insect taxonomy. What was really fun about that class, we would go collect insects. We would just go into the wild and see what we can find. We would pin them in a natural history collection, and our final project was collecting 120 families of insects, which is a lot harder than it sounds. For context, there's a family of insects called the Carabidae, which are the ground beetles, and there's 40,000 species in that one family. So you could theoretically catch 40,000 different species of insects and only have one family. So catching 120 families is actually a lot harder than it sounds. My research was largely good. I got to go around in a truck and collect wheat and breed flies to test the virulence of this specific fly that looks like a mosquito called the Hessian fly against wheat, which we use, as you know, for making bread, so many food items. And there were some cool things about that. I got to learn more about agriculture and farming. I got to know a lot more farmers. I had never met a farmer, but now at that time I got to meet a lot. I got to go to crop breeding meetings, which was so different than what I was ever used to, and be immersed in insect science more broadly, which was awesome. The coursework was good. Working with my research mentor was largely good. There were some difficulties that I've since learned are pretty common working with a principal investigator in science in general. So it's not super unique to my experience. There were other difficulties with the department, but overall, yeah, it was a good experience. I personally was going through some medical and financial issues that led me to withdraw from the program, so I actually did not finish that master's. That said, I didn't leave because the program was bad, or really, it was mainly just personal reasons. I left to go start working full time. I got my medical issues in check, and that all worked out well. I wish I had finished it, but I can't go back in time. I was there for a year and a half. Let me talk now about my year and a half in Pullman more broadly. Like I said, it's different from Western Washington. I've also lived in Texas, and that's also pretty different. So wherever you're coming from to consider WSU, whether Washington, Texas, somewhere completely different, just know here's how it is, and it might be different from your experience. The total town population of Pullman is about 40,000 plus or minus some. about 30,000 of those that I can guess are from the university, something like that. I didn't look at the numbers, but when I was thinking about it, that made sense. And it's a small town. It really is a college town where Pullman is an extension of Washington State University. In fact, WSU is literally at the center of the town where you can drive around the school and go to so many different parts of Pullman, parts. I put it in quotes because it's a small town anyway, so, but you can drive around the whole thing. It would probably take 30, 40 minutes, maybe a little more, to drive in a full circle around all of Pullman. I mean, maybe an hour if there's like traffic or something, and it's gonna be a lot longer if there's a football game, which I'll get into. But yeah, it's a small town. So some people will get really bored. My friend, he had told me he was there for a year, then he transferred because he was bored out of his mind without anything to do. Other people will like it. I learned living there that although I like the amenities that come with a big city, I can also be fine and honestly thrive if I only have stuff like board games and good people and a Walmart, which I would just go to Walmart for all my food and I would hang out with people, do board games. That is entertainment enough for me when I'm not working. So for me, it was great, but I'm not sure. I think for some people it's really tough. I will say WCU has a big party scene for undergrads. I wasn't undergrad there. I have no personal experience with that or anything, but that's a big part of the life there. Also the fraternities, sororities, Greek life, things like that. That's a big part of the life. So that can probably be a draw or a dissuading factor for some people. But like I said, the community itself, the Pullman vibe, it's cool, very chill in terms of people outside the university. And the faculty there I had good experiences with all the faculty I worked with. There were some that, they're just not that great to work with, but it's not crazy like, whoa, like I can't believe this happened, like nothing like that. So I like I said, I've only had experience with some faculty, so I can't speak to the whole campus or anything, but yeah, it was good. During my time, I was a senator in the Graduate and Professional Student Association, so I got to work with a ton of people on campus. That was nice to get exposure to different departments and to get exposed to the broader Pullman community as well. I got to volunteer in a few ways in Pullman. That helped me learn more about the community outside of the school. It's a pretty small community outside the school, but still it does exist. I'll say too, for general culture, Pullman and WSU is pretty closely tied in some departments more than others to the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, which is about 10 minutes away from WSU. A lot of departments do things together pretty closely where they'll do events together or they'll do different college stuff together, right? And I know for me, when I was doing my master's research, there was a person on my committee who was from the University of Idaho who worked closely with a few people who were also on my committee. That's pretty common from my understanding. From the undergrad perspective, I'm not sure how much that is true, but it may be true, I'm not sure. And Moscow right there is pretty cool. I actually feel like my favorite restaurants in that whole area are in Moscow. I think there's like a surprisingly good Indian place in Moscow. There's a surprisingly good Mexican place in Moscow, which is so funny. You wouldn't think Idaho has really good cultural food, but there's a few standouts. Pullman, I will say Pullman doesn't have very good food. There's some options that are pretty all right, but once you go back to somewhere that has really good food, like for instance, my favorite Mexican food honestly is in Texas. And when I go back, I'm like, whoa, like this is good. But the Mexican food in California is also really good. And I love Indian food, but I will say, yeah, even though there wasn't good Indian food in Pullman, there's a surprisingly good spot in Moscow. And I find that if you want to get good food, just go to Moscow. It's pretty close to Pullman. And you'll be surrounded by wheat fields. So if you're used to high rises, skyscrapers, or even just more things around you, be prepared to just see a bunch of wheat everywhere. That's different. That was different for me, but I liked it. I liked it, the chill vibe. And I was there to do research anyway, so for me, it was good. Those are some things about my experience there. Let me think a little bit. Oh, yeah, football. I have to mention football. So so what's crazy, to be honest, is I actually never went to any of the football games. It's really because I think football personally is pretty boring, but for people who really like football, they really get into it at WSU. The Cougs are so huge there, and anytime there's football games during football season, it's really, wow, it's cool to see because people will drive their big RVs to campus, and there's so much traffic. Like, there's entire parking lots on campus that are dedicated to tailgaters and RVs where you actually can't park there, even if you have a parking pass, which truthfully I feel like is pretty messed up, but that's just how they do it. I get it. The football culture is such a big part of the school, and those are huge. Like when WSU wins a game, you can feel it across the campus. And I probably should have gone to get more immersed in the community there. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let me know if you have any questions. Hope this was helpful to someone.